Welcome to the Smart Vodcast. We're so excited to have a guest today. Our guest is Ben Watson of Perfect Feet. So super excited to have him here, and I actually get to see him every day. So Ben and I share some clinic space here at Smart, and really excited to be able to share a little bit more about what he does to help our patients keep moving. And so, as the name of his business would suggest, he's all about making people have perfect feet.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about Perfect Feet, how you got started, and what you do.
Well, thanks, Cameron. Hello, everyone. So Perfect Feet Foot Care Center is a company that I started in the early 2000s, and we focus on making custom orthotics and doing biomechanical evaluations. We like to help people that have an active lifestyle stay active. And so we help guide people on not only designing things custom, but also on what type of footwear and characteristics are appropriate for them.
Right. And so I've been a big benefactor of having you in the clinic. It's been awesome for me to have you, not only just to help my patients, but also business advice and stuff. You've been a great mentor for me. But with patients, it's been awesome to have a resource right in clinic where if things aren't working right, so that their mechanics are poor, or we see all the time where somebody's walking on the treadmill and you'll walk by and be like, whoa, check this out, and you'll have shoe recommendations right off the bat even, and that's been super helpful to be able to have that resource right there in clinic. You've got a keen eye for it for sure.
Thanks, Cameron. That's very kind. So speaking about footwear, I like to think about the biomechanics just a little bit different. It seems like pronation and supination, pronation kind of has this negative connotation attached to it, but when you look at it from the eyes of its dynamic adaptability as well as shock absorption, it's very necessary. And so I like to think about the foot as a dynamic structure that's designed to have a lot of motion. You just want to cross that motion in a safe way, in a strong, safe, protected way. And with the running shoes these days, you can pretty much cater the running shoe technology and parameters and design to match your foot type. Not only match your foot type, but also match the type of activity that you're doing that day. So if you wanted a design that's going to be a little bit more nimble, add a little bit more stress to your foot to have a quicker feel, you can do that, but then have a shoe that's designed a little bit sturdier for longer runs.
Yeah. Well, and it's awesome to be able to customize that specifically to each person's foot. And that's, I think, one of the things that I really like about what you do versus what I've seen kind of other, podiatrists or others that make foot orthotics. I've seen physical therapists and chiropractors, and a lot of people make foot orthotics, but they don't really have that custom touch, right? So some of them will even do casting, but then they don't, I guess, where you custom make them in-house here, you have the opportunity to make sure that it really fits them well, and you'll modify it, and you'll stick with that patient until it's right for them. I think that's one of the biggest keys that I've seen, aside from the fact that you're just very intuitive and knowledgeable about how to help them. But that custom making of the orthotic, I think, has really been magic in helping people really have success.
Yeah, I think it's quite complex, actually. You have a very dynamic structure with the foot that has a lot of range of positions that we could cast it in. And so we could take 10 different casts in 10 different positions. And so we just try to make it, give the person the least amount of support while still accomplishing the goals. And I really like the orthotics and the shoes to work together. If you think about a lot of the footwear now is around 1.25 inches thick, and foot orthotics are pretty average, about 1/4 inch thick. And so it's really critical that they interface well together, and that shoe is part of that entire system, and that it makes sense. So much of the things that we see now is that we'll see the classic 3/4 length plastic orthotic in a really soft shoe, and for me it just doesn't make sense to have that hard plastic layer and then softer layers right after that. That's one of the big aspects, that when we create a design, we really want it to function together.
Right. And I get to kind of overhear oftentimes as I'm walking by the consultations that you have with your patients, and you're so very, keyed into their every need and the specifics of what their foot needs versus what they kind of want to get out of it. And that's tough to balance, right?
It really is, because sometimes it's just not possible. We can't pull it off.
Right.
Yeah, if they want a super lightweight shoe, but their mechanics can't handle it, then we just can't do it.
Right. But I'm always amazed by what you can do. Like, I've seen you, short of performing miracles, I've seen you do some pretty creative and really awesome things. We had a patient that has a leg length discrepancy because of a hip surgery kind of gone bad, and you've been able to make some custom modifications to her shoes, and she's brought in just truckloads of shoes, and you've made it work for her.
I think with the leg length discrepancy, that's one area in the past couple of years that we've been able to excel. Historically, if you think about the material density that they're using in shoes, it's been quite a bit firmer than it is now, and the materials are softening up, and they're just a little bit more fluid as you walk on them. And what in the industry for shoe cobblers, they would use a really firm material, and they'd stick that on the bottom of an athletic shoe, and it would be walking on this brick or a 2x4 that had no flow to it. And so what we've been focusing on is trying to make sure the materials match that shoe in the density, as well as the rocker in the forefoot, to create the fluidity that is desired. Everybody wants that. If you have to wear a substantial lift, you don't want it to be clumsy as well.
Right. Yeah. You want to feel, quote unquote, normal as possible. I think that's a huge thing, because you can custom design it to the person. You can really not just solve their shoe need, but you can help them with their performance in terms of running or exercise performance. I think that's another thing. Like I said, I had a patient on the treadmill the other day, and he was experiencing some foot and knee pain, and you were able to peg right off the bat which shoe he needed even, and he was so surprised by that. Like, whoa, he was able, just by walking by, and that's maybe a little bit atypical of being able to just peg it just by watching him for 2 seconds, but
it's a bad habit.
Well, it's a good habit, though.
My wife and I ran a 5K the other day, and we were running behind people, and took everything I had to not say anything as I ran past people, and just blurt out what shoe they should be in, just to help their mechanics. With the mechanics, I think we focus a lot on the 3 different categories in running shoes, the neutral, stability, and motion control shoes, but what we're really talking about is the frontal plane stability of that shoe. And what they do is they make one portion of the shoe a firmer material, one portion a little bit softer, so that as you compress it, the softer material is going to compress and the firmer material is going to resist that compression.
Right.
And that is one of 5 or 6 aspects that really are critical in shoe design. And I think we actually focus on that just a little bit too much and miss like the midsole drop, the sole density to stack height, and the overall shape of the shoe. What we run into sometimes is, once we take a look at all those parameters, that sometimes the shoe just does not exist. And then we have to get creative in design, cutting it open, redesigning the shoe. One of the things that we have to redesign a lot for is lateral instability. So that shoe, there's not a lot of shoes out there that are reinforced laterally. And so we'll take a shoe, we'll cut it open, we'll grind out that soft material and put a firmer durometer there and put it back together. And people are pretty excited about that.
I've seen miracles, honestly, as people have walked in, and you see them just walking just totally, either on the inside of their foot really bad or on the outside of their foot, and that's one that's really hard to correct.
It really
normally
is.
But man, I've seen people be so neutral after they leave, just being able to walk out and be in such a better position, more comfortable for their feet, better for their knees and hips and back and everything.
So if you think about just that one, frontal plane stability and design for shoes, so if we take that same design where we're using firmer materials on one side, softer on the other, and incorporate that into the orthotic as well, then it's just really cool. You can you don't have to start wedging it a lot. You can just use the material density and the compression rate as a way to control some of those mechanics.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, to use kind of their natural foot dynamics and just design the shoe around that, rather than trying to force their mechanics in some way with a more rigid or a brace or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. And I love that. I'm kind of a naturalist in terms of I'm not a big fan of bracing or other things like that. And honestly, prior to working with you, I wasn't a huge fan of orthotics because most of the people that I talk to, most of my patients would say, I've tried 10 different pairs of orthotics from off the shelf to my podiatrist to this and that, and they never work for me. And as I've learned from you, the reason why they never work for them is they weren't designed to work with their shoe and with their foot. They were just designed to put them into a neutral position while they're just sitting there on a chair in the office, instead of taking into account those dynamic features.
It's pretty short-sighted to believe that every foot needs to be in one position and have one type of material, and that's going to function in all the different shoes. It's just not possible.
Right. To have one orthotic for 10 different shoes doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, especially if someone's active or it's a very difficult problem.
Right.
So we can design things that fit in every shoe. It just won't work.
Right.
And so we address it, and usually we can design things that meet a variety of different types, such as athletic shoes will take a similar type of orthotic, and hiking shoes, those are all, but dress shoes gets a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. Well, what I'm impressed with too is kind of your roster of clients. So you've found solutions for all kinds of people, but you also have a pretty impressive roster of NFL, collegiate, and recreational, but high-performing recreational athletes that come in on a pretty regular basis. What a neat thing to be able to work with those athletes.
Yeah, we're very grateful. It's super cool to help these guys and gals perform at their best, and to just dial in the orthotics down to the 30-second with the design and the material, so they're not thinking about it whatsoever. That's really our goal, is Absolutely. That when they're doing their thing, that they're not thinking about their feet.
Right. And that's the biggest thing they talk about with athletes when they're coming back from injury or whatever, that mentally it's just hard to not think about that injury. And so if you can make their foot comfortable enough and function the right way, you totally eliminate that from being a worry, and they can focus on their sport. And what a cool thing to be able to help. And honestly, some top tier athletes have kind of come through the door, and it's been fun to see that.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. So is that, with working with athletes, is that kind of a fun thing too, to help them problem solve what's going on there in such a dynamic way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of my role is to educate that person on exactly what's going on with their foot, not only in that moment, maybe an acute injury, but just long-term, kind of some of the things that's going to be helpful to them, or some of the things to look out for if that arises, how we're going to address that as a team.
Yeah. You've got on your wall one of the feet of one of these huge linemen.
Yeah.
I can't imagine designing something for a foot that big and trying to think, now, how do we control that much pressure? Because I can't, cutting on a guy that's over 300 pounds, it's got to be pretty impressive, the materials and everything that you had to custom design to make that work.
Yeah, everything's a little firmer.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, what a cool thing to be able to have on your resume of elite athletes, as well as, the Wally Weekender, just weekend warrior runner that needs to feel comfortable and not get injured while doing kind of their thing, right?
Yeah, we have a wide range of clientele, definitely anywhere from your grandma to a professional athlete, and we love helping all of them. And it's every time I walk into a room, it's so different with the who's going to be on the other side, and then their goals. The goals. Right. I mean, someone could really just want to keep their foot, and maybe walk.
Yeah.
Is the goal versus super high performance. And so, like you were talking about earlier with bracing, I'm not a big fan of bracing, and I make custom braces.
Right.
And so the reason why is if you brace a piece of the body, it just has a tendency to atrophy and be a little bit more dependent. And so we're pretty cognitive of not creating a dependency on our devices. We want to just meet the needs with as little amount of support